top number,
Yep.
there's like another set of numbers that you can only enter, and those numbers are only for the people who are like one step below the actual like cabinet members, right? So it's like there's the, it's like, okay, someone's Secretary of State, they're actually Secretary of State, whatever, right? But you're under them, like one step under them. You're G like 25, like the highest number is those people. It's called like special services or something like that. I forget. There's like a name for it, those jobs. And you can't just get those jobs. You have to like,
There we go. All right, let's do the show. What should I call this? Just
I don't know.
M.2 and You. There we go.
Modern PC storage.
Oh, yeah. The storage in 2018.
GS General Schedule. That's what it's called.
Oh, that's what that is.
Yeah, hold on. I read about this recently. That's why I know.
All right.
Yeah, okay. That's right. So it's GS 3 and 4 are internships. GS 5 through 7 are most entry-level people who are actually getting a job. 8 to 12 is mid-level positions. 13 to 15 is top-level supervisory positions. Anything beyond 15 is part of the senior executive service, which is like a real, right?
All right.
The senior executive service, blah, blah, blah. They ensure that the executive management of the government of the U.S. is responsive to the needs, policies, and goals of the nation, blah, blah, blah. That's like serving key positions just below the top presidential appointees. So if an appointee of the president hires you, you're in the senior executive service, and you're GS 15 plus.
All right.
Everyone else is under 15. So I guess 14 is the highest you can get as a normal person, just working government jobs, getting hired and working like a, like Ro. So Ro could get up to 14, and then after that, she needs to be like, become the senior executive service.
Maybe she will one day.
Where I guess she would work for, because I guess the Secretary of Veterans Affairs is a presidential appointee, so she would have to be the assistant.
Let's get her appointed somehow.
Yeah, the president would have to say, Ro, I choose you for or no, she would have to say, I choose this person for Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and then that person would say, Ro, be my assistant. You are now a senior executive service, GS 16, 17, whatever number.
All right.
I'm glad I don't have to deal with any kind of nonsense.
I did when I was at IBM.
I will not work.
I
will not work at any job that ever has that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, my current job does not have that nonsense.
I wonder what like New York State has. Do they have the same kind of thing? If you're
I'm sure there's something. There's like weird.
Is Pete like something number?
There's got to be. There's got to be a number
Pete
and a
has
rule.
Some number working for the state. I don't know.
A lot of people, a lot of big jobs are like that, even if they're not government. It's. I do not want to work in a place like that again. All right. It's Monday, February 5th, 2018. I'm Rim.
I'm hungry.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight, M.2 and You. We're talking about the modern state of storage for computers.
PC types.
PCs.
That you buy and make.
Not SD cards.
No.
All right. I think we have some people watching.
Sad people.
We got 2 people watching and 1 comment.
What's they say?
They said, "Oh yes."
Really? Shouldn't you be saying, "Oh no"? Why how did I end up here? The horror.
Somehow people enjoy this.
They got something. It must be something more enjoyable. Go play a video game.
There might be some sort of parasite. Like maybe we're spreading a disease at conventions, and then we just get people.
No, I guess it's better than the other parasites you could be getting. Crabs.
You saw that article about the foot thing?
What foot thing?
Okay, don't Google it.
It's some foot parasite. That
Do not Google. There is
makes your foot all horrible.
There's a story making the rounds, and the image on every page about this article is something you don't want to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm going to say. If you don't know about the foot thing, do not look up the foot thing.
Should Google the foot
thing? Do
thing?
not Google it.
Just literally type in the foot
If you
thing.
type the foot thing into Google News, I'll bet you'll find something you don't want to see. All right.
Where should I not put my feet to avoid having that be my
Anywhere
foot?
on the ground.
Anywhere on Earth?
Don't be barefoot, like pretty much anywhere.
No, and this is going around?
Well, particularly outside of the United States. It's actually pretty rare in the United States, but not zero.
All right.
But one of the basically one way to avoid it is don't go barefoot at the beach, but I am willing to take that risk.
Is it a bacteria?
Nope.
Is it a virus?
Nope.
Is it a fungus?
Nope. This is why you don't want to Google it.
Is it an animal?
A
parasite?
Arguably, it is big enough to be visible.
It's a parasitic animal, like
something like that.
Like a bed bug.
We're playing 20 questions with the parasite here.
Like a snail.
Yeah. Oh, I got nobody bit.
It's like a Junji Ito situation.
That's how I'm going to describe these kinds of things from now on. If it was Junji Ito, though, you'd turn into a foot, and then that foot would be covered in the thing, and then you'd get a picture of that.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So the other day, I was sitting in the living room, and I got a halogen torchère, the last halogen bulb in my apartment.
You don't need that shit. Get LED bulb.
No, because LED bulbs still, they are good. Like, I actually have an LED torchère in this room, and it's really good. But the torchère I got in the living room, one, I paid a lot of money for that lamp. And two, it's like the perfect lamp. Like, the light is
like
perfect.
The other one?
No, because it doesn't have glass on top the way this one does.
Okay.
But I was sitting there, and suddenly it just goes, pew, and the light turns off. Didn't explode, because there's no, like, giant tempered glass shield on top of it. So I go over to it, and the light bulb it has had from the beginning just died. I look at it, and unlike kids younger than us who will probably not actually know how analog, like, light bulbs work, I know how they work, and I saw the filament was just broken. I never bought a new light bulb for that, and let me tell you, I did find one, but
it's shady.
If you need to buy an Edison screw bulb for anything, it's pretty easy to figure out, because the only thing you need to know is that it is an Edison screw of the normal size, and then how many watts.
Even in other countries, they have the same light bulb standard.
And it's pretty much how many watts does it take. If you need any sort of like modern LED bulb, usually like the bulb is not a bulb. It's just LEDs that are built into the lamp. If it dies, you throw away the lamp.
I have LED bulbs in all my lamps.
Oh, yeah, but increasingly modern lamps like this lamp that was not cheap either, the LED is just in it.
Oh.
Like, the LED is built into the lamp.
I've not seen a lot of those, and I wouldn't buy one of those.
They're pretty much what you want to buy these days, though.
No, I want to buy a normal lamp that I can put a bulb into, because that way, when they switch from LEDs to some new light technology, I can just screw in a different bulb.
I don't think a new light technology...
Just like I went from regular light to compact fluorescent to LED, all with the same light lamp. No new lamp needed.
I don't think a new technology is on the horizon.
I think they'll make a tiny sun that you can screw in.
The one thing I can say...
A tiny star.
So I had 2 CFLs in the living room in those dim lamps I use for like accent lighting, and one of them died. I didn't get a new one yet, but I happen to still have one box of the last 4 old style light bulbs that I own.
Just incandescent light bulbs?
I had a box with 3
They're going to last
bulbs.
like 5 minutes. It's like we forget like how often those went out. They went out all the goddamn time. We just are so used to it. But like now that we've had compact fluorescent and like LED,
I bought that thing of fucking bulbs when I moved into this apartment.
It's like
a decade ago.
They never die. So the idea of like a light bulb going out used to be a common occurrence. Now it's like super, super rare.
Yep. So
it's like, a bulb went out.
I didn't throw them away because they were still good, but I wasn't going to use them. So I put this old bulb into one of these lamps. So one of these lamps, they're identical lamps, has a CFL, like a modern one, and the other one has an old incandescent bulb. All the people who say that they can tell and that the light quality is different or something, no one can tell me which one is which.
No.
Unless they go look at the bulb inside of the fixture.
It's the same thing as like the bottle of the expensive wine bottle with the Manischewitz in it tastes better. It's the same thing.
However, when I tried,
you can only tell the white balance.
However, I tried putting
in white balance.
I tried putting an LED in one of those because I was going to replace the CFLs, even though we're still good with LEDs.
I did that
because they just use so much less power.
Yep.
The LEDs, at least the ones I had, which are these like daylight ones that are pretty good white light.
That's what I have.
They looked pretty shit in those fixtures, and you could tell because the fixtures made them have sort of this greenish character. So I got to figure out what to do with that. There are LEDs I think provide...
You can just get daylight balance. I mean, not daylight. Instead of the white daylight ones, you can get the more yellow.
Yeah, I got to get a different balance. But I got to figure out if I can completely replace all my remaining CFLs with LEDs. I've replaced most of them. One in the bedroom, it's like this fucking sun that I plugged into the top of the torchère. It's great. But...
just get a light that the kind of use in a driveway, and that'll light up your room real good.
Yep. So I think I talked to you guys before that I had some xenon bulbs and some fixtures, and I actually replaced those with LEDs because the expensive LEDs that'll fit in those weird fixtures are way cheaper than an actual xenon bulb. But halogens, if you don't know the codes and like what a T3 is or a fucking D15, good luck buying a halogen bulb. But I found the one I needed from a non-dodgy place, and it was like $8, and that is way cheaper than the kind of LED bulb I would need to use this kind of T3 connector or this T3 form factor.
Yeah,
with
I don't think people are making
connector.
they're not making too many of those. They're not exactly in high demand.
Yeah, so I'm going to eventually probably buy a pure LED from the beginning light to replace this halogen. But in the interim, it was way cheaper to just buy this $8 halogen bulb. Because this halogen bulb lasted a decade. This next one's probably going to last another decade. That is my story. So we got any tech news?
There is tech news. So I guess, there's been, many net neutrality talks. There's not a lot new to say. But actually, there was something new to say. I totally lied. Something happened that we sort of thought, but we didn't know exactly how it was going to go down. So, in the United States, I guess we got to make this tech talk and not legal talk somehow.
Yep.
But I think
we need to give context because we do have a lot of non-U.S. listeners, and we gotta.
Right.
You got to remember how kind of fucked up the U.S. is from the
Anyway,
inside.
there's a group called the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and they regulate radio signals and cable TV and all sorts of electronic communications things, telephones primarily, right? And that includes ISPs and internets. They regulate that as well. They make the regulations. It's a regulatory body. It's where if you want like a radio operator's license, you get it from the FCC.
Yep.
So the FCC, against the wishes of everyone except the FCC, undid the previous net neutrality regulations that we put in recently, and so now it's back to the way it was before then, which is not good.
Because the before then was a time when there really wasn't a modern internet, and it wasn't a problem yet.
Anyway,
the reason it's not a
it was
problem...
actually becoming a problem.
Yeah, and we fixed it with legislation and regulation.
So, what happened was we said, well, on the one hand, there's a lot of states out there that disagree, and those states, such as New York, want to have the old rules back, but states don't have the power to do that. The federal government has the power to do that.
And our federal government is...
Because it is an interstate deal, not a, radio signals go across state lines.
Yep.
Telephones make calls across state lines.
But our federal government...
across state lines and out of the country.
...is kind of broken right now, so we can't fix it there.
No. So... some of the smart states found a nice loophole, which is very clever, and they said, all right, we can't pass some law in our state that says you have to have net neutrality to be an ISP. We can't do that. But what we can do is we can say this. Anyone who wants to have a contract with our state to do some work or something must be an ISP that adheres to these principles of net neutrality. So basically, you don't have to... If you're an ISP in New York, or what's the other state, Wisconsin?
There's actually
Minnesota,
let's see, lawmakers in
Montana.
6. So it's now up to 6 states.
All right, so
California, New York, North Carolina, and so North Carolina, Illinois might be the 7th and 8th, I guess.
Okay, but anyway, a bunch of states, saw this trick and all decided to go in on it. And the trick is this: you can be an ISP and operate in New York and be very unnet neutral, and you won't be breaking any laws, but if you make a contract with New York State, say to provide some service to an office of the state or who knows what.
Or say to use land that you're going to run cables in that is leased from the state.
Right, you're making a contract with the state, then you either A, have to abide by net neutral principles, or not have your contract with the state, just void it, and the state will pay someone else for that, business. So, yeah, that's a clever move, and it's going to go to court eventually, but... I guess I haven't seen any unnet neutral activities on my internet yet that I could
my internet
that I could tell.
Yeah, the thing is though, I haven't had because there's a period like 4 years ago where Netflix just wouldn't work that well in New York on Verizon, and there was an issue like that happened for a while, but it seemed to have calmed down.
Yeah, there's a website you can go to. I think it's fast.com, FAST, like speed, fast. And that is a site that will test your internet speed very, very easily. And it is run by Netflix.
Nah, fancy that.
Yeah, Netflix made this site to test your internet speed and, sort of like see if anyone is throttling the Netflix,
This does set a sort of, I don't want to say dangerous, but worrying precedent yet again that an issue in the United States is that traditionally the only reason any state has wanted to do its own thing so-called states' rights has been because of slavery or racism or religion. It's always been the bad sides of things.
Yeah, states want rights because the federal government would have regulations that would say, don't be evil. And a state is like, well, we want to be evil. States' rights, states' rights.
And part of the reason why the correct side of the political spectrum didn't really push on those sorts of things is complicated, but they basically never did. You very rarely had states being like, we're going to do universal health care. Fuck y'all. So it seems with technology issues in particular, states that are on the left side are more and more willing in the United States to do stuff like this. And there's a lot of reasons why that are beyond the scope of a Monday episode of Geek Nights. But the problem is, the main reason why I have not pushed for this too hard is that if you let the states that are intelligent do intelligent things like this, and you let the states that are having problems because they voted in Republicans do the opposite of that, you're just going to increase the divide between people with technology and without, with healthcare and without, with computers and without.
Well, that's going to bring about the cyber dystopia that I've been waiting for much faster.
But that cyber dystopia is not great for most people.
But I've been preparing for so long.
I have been too.
It rewards me because that's what I invested in and counted on.
Well, because Scott,
I'm a selfish person.
We're deckers and company men. We're not like the orcs.
Or at least you think you're not.
Shadowrun. It's a role-playing system where you can play an elf who is also a hacker. I dare you to find it. Oh, and a dragon runs for president. I dare you to find a more rim setting.
We need the dragon president now more than ever.
Yeah, I would vote Dunkless on.
Let's go. Bring it on.
Policies.
Burn, eat people, burn them down. I'm a dragon, rawr.
So in some other news, this sort of come out that Uber and Lyft, those companies
that
Uber
suck.
Yeah, Uber more so than Lyft.
One sucks less than the other one, but they both suck.
Yeah. Not going to get into why they're evil, but let's just say Uber.
Evil.
Uber is evil.
Do not use them ever. Use a legit cab or not something else.
Now, the hope has been that all those problems are made moot by accessible self-driving car technology. Because self-driving cars mean that no one ever needs to take a cab anywhere again ever. The car itself does it. That also means that maybe for most people, individual ownership of cars doesn't even matter anymore. And there's a problem that a big part of all the employment in the United States is people driving cars. We've talked about all this before.
Truck driver is the #1 job in the country. In most states, it's the #1 job. And then driver of car, period, is like... It
employs like a huge percentage of the middle class.
If you eliminated all the jobs where your job is to drive, there would be not like... That's like a very, very perhaps double-digit % of all jobs in the United States.
So it appears... based on this article and some of the discussion that's been happening in the sphere lately, that the companies like Uber, their end game is to try to have regulation and urban planning and policies in place to basically ban the private use of self-driving cars, particularly in urban areas where, the vast majority of people are. So I'm actually okay with the principle of you can't own cars anymore. Car should, in my ideal future, car is just one more form of mass transit. It's the one that drives very small numbers of people to destinations that not very many people want to go to and handles like last mile transportation. But car should just be one more offering of the government right alongside train, bus, etc. So I'm okay with not letting people own their stupid cars anymore. I'm not okay with private company using that legislation to be the sole owner of said cars to continue to wage its war on mass transit and modern practices.
I mean, even if they do that, right? And it would be crappy in the short term.
Yep.
But historically speaking, right, that you used to have private subway, IRT, VMT.
Yeah, and that was a terrible idea.
Yeah, no, we had private train.
Terrible idea.
Yeah, we had, we still have private plane. But
yeah, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't.
No, but the point is that over time, because they were so terrible, they became not so public anymore, right?
Oh, I see where you're going.
Not so private. Even if we let Uber do this, it's like, well, it'll just get nationalized eventually.
Just so you're saying that Uber could become Amtrak too?
At least to the Amtrak level of nationalization.
Yeah. But I guess from a technology standpoint, the thing, self-driving cars are still going to be crazy disruptive, and this is yet an example of one more way they're going to be disruptive that a lot of people are not even thinking about. Whether or not private car ownership even matters, and whether or not large conglomerate companies might use legislation ostensibly promoting better technology governance to, in fact, just control an industry as a private contractor. So, in some other news, we got to talk about this because everyone was talking about it, and it was kind of a big deal.
You had too much news going on.
Yeah, well, because we don't know how much main bit we got. Let's see how that goes. You want to not talk about the Hawaii missile alert?
It's not that big a deal. I feel like it's a beaten bush.
I feel it wasn't. It's partly we just didn't do a Geek Nights around when it happened. But basically, if you lived in Hawaii, you got a legit notification from the government on your phone that said, there's a fucking missile coming. This is not a drill. And because of the way the government works, that was not corrected for 40 minutes?
Too long.
Yeah. 40 seconds might have been too long.
Any number of seconds is too long.
But the original story that came out, I think the joke I saw on every UX designer's Twitter was, well, I'm making a slide about this in my next TED Talk.
Right, everyone blamed it on the UI, which is, of course, an awful UI.
The UI is atrocious. The UX is atrocious.
Yeah, but I mean, that's same, because there are very few companies and very few situations where people producing software, right, have a culture of valuing design and UI. For example, Apple, obvious, right? But most places that produce software do not have a culture, appreciation, or care for design. They just it works. It's just a bunch of text on a screen. They don't give a fuck. They don't even care or think about it. It's not even a matter of being bad at designing, right? It's like they actually don't care or even think about design is not a step.
Yep.
Right? It's like...
But UX, user experience, goes one step behind just the design of a GUI because, yeah, this GUI is awful. But the entire process and procedures around something are also part of the user experience. And the process here was bad. And the rules people had to follow were... It seems like everything was bad in this situation. So this outcome was basically inevitable, and I am shocked it did not happen sooner.
Yeah, pretty much.
I guess the only point I really got here is that this is not just the story of a poorly designed menu caused a missile alert.
No.
The story here is that GUIs can prevent, or GUIs can mitigate or minimize the chance of mistakes being made. UX design can also mitigate and minimize the chances of these things happening. But the story of bad decisions like this is always bigger than you think, and don't drill it down to one slide in some UX designer's talk at some TEDx that you're going to see next month.
I mean, it's just a question of, right, it's, we know how to design something, right? You go to design places, and it's like they always talk about how to design things better, how to get your typography good, right? It's like, but everyone there is someone who already cares about design, right?
And also, they tend to care more about the aesthetics.
If you got someone who's painting Warhammer miniatures, right? And it's like, and they're trying to do better at it, you can show them techniques like, here's how to dry brush, and here's how to do that, right? Here's how to apply the primer better, right? But if there's somebody who literally takes a can of red spray paint and goes, I'm done, and just doesn't give a fuck, it's like, that's what you have most of the time in software production, right? And it's not really a problem if someone does that in Warhammer because it's like, all right, that's what you like, bro. I mean, whatever, right? But
it's a problem when you're hurt the missile alert system for Hawaii.
Right, it doesn't hurt anyone. But a badly designed software, even if it is technically speaking in the code bug-free, the poor design could actually cause bugs, right? Pebkek. So,
and you cannot assume that a user is going to follow a procedure or do the right thing. So a user experience has to take into account all of human failings and mitigate those things. Like, say there's a situation where you have a UX that gates people to prevent common mistakes from being made. Like, if they if you want to send a real missile alert, you got to click on it. You got to do a confirmation thing of some kind. You also have to assume that someone's going to go one step further and do all of that and then continue to proceed in making their terrible mistake. So maybe you need a way to undo it, a break glass. You got to think a lot of steps deeper than even a lot of UX designers do. Last and least.
Oh, yeah, even more. Oh, come on. This is not Tech News Roundup here.
This is kind of amazing. Best Buy announced that they're no longer going to sell physical CDs.
They still sell CDs?
That's the news. Okay. I am shocked that any big stores sell CDs.
I'm shocked anyone buys CDs.
Yeah. I don't own a CD player, I don't think.
Yeah, I can play one in my computer.
Oh, I still have my Fujitsu Lifebook. It has an optical drive in it.
Yeah, I have an optical drive in the computer.
I also have one optical USB drive for emergencies. I guess I could play a CD
when
off
we were
of that.
cleaning up my the Connecticut house this weekend, I found 2 Discmen. I don't know if they worked or not.
Yeah.
Didn't care, threw them out.
But it seems like everyone's moving to streaming, and hardly anyone seems to care about owning music. Streaming seems to be good enough, and I think the whole industry is going to have to align itself 100% around streaming. Well, 90% around streaming, 10% around collectors that you can milk for a lot of money.
There is a niche industry going on.
Like the lossless players.
No. There. First of all, there are people who are stupid and collect vinyls.
Yep.
Right? Of new things for some reason. Okay, whatever you like, bro. You like hearing music that goes, go be my guest.
Don't collect CDs, though. CDs will actually, they wear out. They'll just start flaking, and then they're dead.
No, but there are people who are, I see this in K-pop a lot, is they'll produce albums where they have, photo books and a big, it won't be in a plastic jewel case. It'll be like a big cardboard thing with all sorts of shit in there, collector's crap, right? Sort of like I used to buy anime DVDs, and they would come with plushies, and underwear, and action figures, right?
Where is it? I still got the Eye of Vogler somewhere.
Right, that kind of thing. So imagine if albums all came in Eye of Vogler. That's what K-pop is like. So you'll buy them if you're a fan of that group, and you won't listen to the music on the CD. You'll stream the music or watch it on YouTube, right? To get views up to make it more popular. But, people will buy those to collect them as things, just to have things, because they're materialistic collecting people who, I guess, that's not good.
Yep. So it's kind of amazing that this long tail lasted so long with people buying CDs. And
I'm surprised it was worth the shelf space.
I think it's partly that it takes a long time for retail, big retail organizations to change anything that they're doing.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's some whole workflow around CDs get shipped in bulk, and then with comics and things, some things can't be shipped back. And
if I was CEO of Best Buy, right? I mean, think about it. When was the last time I, Scott, bought or listened to music on a CD? Probably sometime in Beacon before, when I had the car.
When was the last time? My CD player didn't work in my car at any point when we lived in Beacon.
Before I plugged got the thing to plug the iPod into the car, I used CDs in the car, right? As soon as I stopped using CDs, period, which is, I guess, 10 plus years ago.
2004, I think, is the last time I listened to music from a Redbook CD.
Right, something like that. That's when they should have stopped selling them. As soon as you stop using them, I'm the CEO of Best Buy. I haven't used a CD in a year. Be careful, though,
because
we should stop selling these.
If you are wealthier, you're probably an early adopter. I mean, my family actually, we invested and saved and bought a CD player in the early days to add to the hi-fi system.
When's the last time anyone you know used a CD?
But tapes continued to be sold and popular for a long time after CDs were introduced. And
I didn't even know who's still buying DVDs and Blu-rays. I'd stop selling those.
Yeah, a lot of people. I see them in my Anna Twitter feed mostly.
I think they're doing the collector's item biz. I don't think they're actually...
Actually, a lot of them are buying shows and then laughing at people later when those shows are taken off of streaming platforms and there's literally nowhere to watch them and the physical media is sold out and you try to pirate them and they're not even easily pirated because no one gave a shit.
If no one gives a shit, then that's not a show that I need to see.
Yeah, but I thought I've had
name a show?
I couldn't find an easy torrent of Mahot Sky Tai, the original.
You have that, though.
Because I pirated it, and I kept it. What if I hadn't kept it, and today I was like, man, I should really watch Mahot Sky Tai.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, it might be tough. Boop.
Do you have...
Dow Jones Index to prove it live. Yeah, it went down and back up. Don't worry about it.
Do you have Elf Princess Rain on DVD?
Elf Princess Rain. Yeah, I do have it on DVD.
I'm so cool.
I'm so smart.
I
got KO Century Beast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that on DVD. I still got my 5 or 6 Beautiful Dreamers.
I don't think you need those. They got put out again.
I should give all those away. Let's see, what else?
You're going to give away your Third Reich coffee shops?
No. Cool Guy says hello. Oh, yeah, house fires. Torchlight lamps are not dangerous and don't cause house fires unless one...
House fires are caused by people smoking. But then actually the bigger cause than that is people just plugging too much shit into one outlet and having shitty electrical systems.
Shitty electrical systems is probably the primary cause.
Numero uno.
You know what actually causes a lot of those issues? Old light switches.
Mm-hmm.
Or shittily installed light switches. Light switches
or
physically
just
wear out.
plugging too much shit into one outlet.
Yeah, but I would argue that if you can plug too much shit in one outlet, your house has already failed you.
People plug in a power strip into a power strip into a power strip.
Yeah, but they usually do that because their house doesn't have enough circuits. My apartment in New York has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think 16 circuits.
Anyway.
I only have like 4 rooms.
Anyway, the point is, if you need help with fire safety, contact your local fire department. I follow the New York Fire Department on Twitter.
If you contact your local fire department,
they provide a lot of good info.
They will often happily send a fireman to your house to explain this to you.
Especially,
they'll just show up, and you know what?
Especially if you're in a small town and they're bored.
But
they don't want your. Trust me, the number one thing a firefighter does not want is your house to be on fire.
Yeah, so plugging in the wrong.
They will do anything they can do to make sure nothing sets on fire in town, because that means they can sit in the firehouse and pet the dog and clean the truck. They do not. If the alarm goes off, they are not like, I get to go to work. They're like, fuck.
But with halogen torchieres in particular,
what asshole didn't have a smoke detector?
The reasons they cause fires are, one, stupid people put them next to curtains or some shit like that. Mm-hmm. People have a really low ceiling and buy a torchiere because they don't know how lights work.
Mm-hmm.
Someone puts a 500-watt bulb into a 100-watt fixture.
Mm-hmm.
Or they knock it over.
Someone's deep frying a turkey in the kitchen.
Yeah. I do love that torchiere. All right, let's get on to the rest of the show. Because I'm crazy hungry.
I'm so hungry. I only ate one thing today.
But anyway, things of the day. So this video is called Why the Metric System Matters, but what it really is about is it talks about a bunch of different measuring and counting systems and a bunch of historical stuff. And it's a pretty good video. Goes into a little more depth than a lot of you have probably encountered before, but it explains something that I didn't really know, and I realized that no one around me seems to know. So Scott, American shoe sizes.
Mm-hmm.
How the fuck do they work?
They're just slightly different from the European ones. They're like half up, basically.
Europe uses pretty much just metric now, number of centimeters.
There's the UK ones were half up from.
Yeah, because so the US but anyway, what does a 10 mean and versus a 10 and a half? What is that system based on?
It was probably someone's foot, and they were like, well, that foot is X, and there's probably something cobblers did and measured with.
So
funny that my thing of the day also involves cobbling.
Oh yeah, because I actually like the American system for purely selfish reasons, because my shoe size is exactly a US 10 and a half.
Mine depends on the shoe company. So if it's a Nike shoe, it's usually 12. But some other companies could be 11, 11 and a half.
I mean, if I buy quality shoes, I don't buy shoes from weird places, but
I think I bought some dress shoes. It was even lower.
My 10 and a half is spot on.
It's always different from different companies.
But that system is actually based on a specific unit of measure called the barleycorn.
Okay.
It's how many barleycorns long your foot is. Anyway, this video is pretty interesting.
Do cobblers use barleycorns?
Yeah. It's American shoe sizes, much like American acres, seem to be based on some of the oldest units of measure that are still in common use today, because we have these meta systems that are actually based on these old systems.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
So what's your shoe-related thing?
So I found out about, I've always thought, hey, there used to be cobblers about, but now there aren't really cobblers. The only cobbling that goes on these days is shoe shining, replace shoelaces, and maybe replace a sole, and that's about it.
I mean,
right?
I had some Birkenstocks, and I wanted to get them fixed.
And usually in the city, it'll be shoe and watch repair place, right?
The cobbler wanted 80% of the price of new shoes, so I just bought new shoes.
And whatever, all in one. Anyway, so I was like, you can't really, I always thought, well, you can't really cobble sneakers or shoes that people actually wear, right? It's pretty much just dress shoes and boots and stuff. But
I would have thought, without this video, who even cares? You buy another, whatever the current Nike is and just move on.
Right, but no, there's this kid in Chicago, and I think his dad and also his grandpa were cobblers, and he is also a cobbler. He's the teen cobbler, almost like a superhero, teen cobbler. And he has a store called Fix Yo Kicks, which is fucking awesome.
I did not take into account the people who want to keep their old non-leather shoes together.
Sneakers are a big craze for the past, X years, right?
Or if you live in the rest of the country, tennis shoes.
Anyway, or kicks.
So
this kid in Chicago, you bring him like your Jordans from the 90s, he'll make them look new, even though they're from the 90s or whatever. And it's like, that's fucking awesome. I wish I had that kid.
Yeah.
I hope it's cheaper to bring him, I guess you're only bringing shoes to him if they're, ultra rare cocoa beans.
I would take him because I got my Nike free running shoes.
I don't know if you can fix those.
Yeah, I'd be curious because the new ones are great for running. But there was one
Wouldn't it be cheaper to just buy new ones?
Oh, yeah, but they're different. I wear them for running. I wear them out. I don't care what they look like. But there was one year where they looked really good. And I got a pair of those that are not looking so great, and you can't get those anymore. If he could make those look good, I would pay a reasonable amount of money.
This kid's awesome.
Yeah. In the meta moment, the book club book is Emily Wilson's translation of The Odyssey.
By Homa. But really probably more by Emily Wilson, I'm guessing.
Well,
I don't know. How much is what?
It's a new interpretation.
Yeah, we'll discuss that when we do the book club.
Yeah. The previous book club book, because it's still on the website, was N.K. Jemisin's The Fifth Season. And I just want to reiterate again, if you didn't read that book, you should go back and read it, because the fifth season and the trilogy it's part of is real fucking good. And more and more people around me are reading it because of the book club, so you should too. Otherwise, if you saw us at PAX Unplugged, the video of our talk is on YouTube. If you saw us at PAX South, the video of our talk is on YouTube. If you saw us at MAGFest, the video of one of our talks is on YouTube. And if you a long time ago saw our Judge Anime by its cover at Anime Boston, the video of us doing it at Scott's apartment for the fall 2017 season of anime.
Winter 2018.
Oh, yeah, winter 2018. This is one older. Anyway, it is on YouTube.
The fall 2017 also is on YouTube, but that's old.
All of these are on YouTube, and you can enjoy them. So, we haven't actually talked about, how hard drives work in the modern era as far as a consumer would care.
Did we do an episode on SSDs? I don't remember.
Pretty sure we did. I'll dig some of that up.
I mean, we can just briefly go over it, right? So when I first built a computer, it was ATA. You had a ribbon cable and a Molex 4-pin connector that went into that hard drive. It had spinning magnetic platters and read heads that would zip across them, right? And that was a hard drive. And there was no other kind of hard drive. That was it. And they were slow, and they got faster over time, and they changed it from IDE to SATA. And SATA was better because it was faster, and it didn't use a stupid ribbon cable. It used a much smaller cable that was way better.
Yep.
And
it was serial. In general, there's been a move away from, at least outside of tightly controlled environments, like on your motherboard with CPUs and everything, but you move to serial interfaces for connectivity to slower things as opposed to parallel, because it's really hard to keep those bits in sync in parallel unless you can parallelize the workflow, which for hard drives until recently you could not do.
Anyway, so then we get to SATA, and it was also a better power connector, and it was smaller, and you can get smaller drives because the connectors are smaller, and the drives got better, and so on. But then, the idea of the SSD was always there. People would get a ton of RAM, which meant 32 megabytes of RAM.
Yeah.
And they would make a RAM drive, right, that would only last while the computer was on, but they tried to keep the computer on a long time, Or people would get a whole bunch of RAM sticks and put them on a PCI card and make a drive, out of RAM.
Yep.
Some way, because it's, that's solid state storage, meaning, magnets is not solid state, right? It's right, a chip. That where an SD card, that's solid state, like flash storage, right? If you want to know what's actually happening there, it's you had to go look that up. I'm sorry. That's not what the show's about.
Yep.
Also, I can't explain it to you.
And what's interesting is actually this stuff in general, the protocols and how things work and all the details have actually gotten way more complex around PC storage than they were back when I paid attention because I was meticulously researching how to build PCs.
Yep. But eventually we had SSDs, but they were crazy expensive and small, and they're still more expensive and have less storage. You still sometimes need magnet drives if you need a ton of storage, terabytes. But we have the SSDs now. They're the size of laptop hard drives. They connect to that same SATA. It goes up to 6 gigabits per second. And that's still what we got, and it's still great, and people still use it. But it wasn't fast enough. The SATA couldn't really get any faster, even though the SSDs could go faster. So on your computer, on your motherboard, there's PCI Express slots, and no one's really using those except to hold video cards.
Now, it's interesting. Remember in the old day, there was ISA and PCI and AGP and all these slots where you could use a protocol to connect things to your computer.
Yep.
Generic things like a card that does USB or a sound card or a video card.
Or a network card.
Yeah, you're putting a board in your computer that gives you shit.
But now they slowly added all those things to the CPU and the motherboard and the bridge, North Bridge, the South Bridge, whatever. So now your motherboard has a sound card. You don't put a sound card in there.
Yep.
Your motherboard has like 1 or 2 network ports. You don't add a network card. So like the motherboards, even mini ITX ones, have like fucking everything on them. And no one needed to put cards. You know, everyone used USB. They didn't need a game card to connect their game controller.
Now again, USB, the big deal with USB is that it was a serial protocol as opposed to a parallel protocol like LPT.
Like we stopped needing to use those slots. So some people got a bunch of video cards.
Yeah.
Because they had too much money.
Some people like me have a FireWire card or something weird.
Yeah, but most people put in one video card and had a bunch of empty slots.
Yep.
Right? So the thing is, the way the PCI Express works is that it's crazy fast, obviously. That's why your video card connects to it. But there's only so much bandwidth there. Just like anything else, there's bandwidth. You couldn't put 100 video cards in there. There wouldn't be enough, bits to go around, right?
Yep.
So
now, not to get into the details because it's kind of beyond the scope of this, but that's why you'll see like you plug in one video card and it runs at 16, but if you put in 2, it's 8 and 8.
Yep. Anyway, so what they call this is what, channels? You have so many PCI channels, something like that? I forget what it is.
Lanes.
Lanes. That's what they call it, lanes. So your motherboard and your CPU have a limited number of PCI lanes. And you can only, once you've used those lanes up, you can't add any more cards or anything else to use PCI Express, even if you got vacant slots, right? So they're like, well, that's faster than SATA. Why don't we go borrow some of their lanes? So you could get solid-state drives that plug in the PCI Express slot.
Yep.
But that's kind of silly, but it works, and it's really fast. So, okay, sure.
And there's all these other ways to do fast storage that are enterprise-only, server-only, way beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today.
Right. But what they currently have, the latest and greatest technology, is the M.2 slot.
Now, this is important. This is kind of why we're doing this show. A lot of people confused thinking, because SATA was sort of, there were other form factors for SATA, but SATA, for all intents and purposes, was both the form factor for the cabling and the protocol.
Yeah, up until now, it was pretty much you plug stuff in where it fits and it works and you don't have to think about it, right? M2 makes, configuring the PC and the storage a little weird compared to before, and there's like a lot of weird stuff going on that you won't know unless you've been educated.
Because M.2 is literally just the form factor. They basically needed a way. The fact that hard drives were pretty big in the old days. In the old days, they were even bigger. But nowadays, if it's not a spinning disk, it's really just, it can be look at a micro SD card. Storage can be really tiny.
They have a micro SD card that are 512 gigs.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit.
So
it's like smaller than a cornflake.
But the form factor of plugging in SATA or all these other ways didn't really make sense to have just this tiny little chip sticking out of the end.
You open up your solid state drive and it's 2.5 inches and you look inside and there's almost nothing in there.
Yep. And for most people who aren't building a giant desktop computer, because desktops really are not, workstations are not a thing for most people anymore.
Nope.
You wanted a form factor to be able to just put a hard drive into some small computer in a modern way that made sense for the way computers are used today.
It's other than the power supply and the video card, literally the motherboard and the CPU is the whole computer. So you could get mini ITX computers and make really flat cases if you could somehow get rid of that stuff. And the hard drive, even the 2.5-inch SSDs were, really gumming up the works in terms of making the flat computer.
So as a result, my hard drive is smaller than one of my RAM chips, and it's just plugged into the motherboard.
It's like a stick of gum, but slightly bigger, maybe smaller than a bookmark. It's small.
Yep.
All right, so M2 refers to just the physical slot on the motherboard that these things go into, right? So, which is separate from what it's actually doing. So an M2 slot on most motherboards you're going to buy today can actually work either in SATA mode or PCI Express mode. So you plug a thing into it, a drive, you get an M2 drive and plug it in. That drive might be using SATA or it might be using PCI Express,
This is why you gotta read the manual for your motherboard and the specs if you're buying
and
a
the drive.
computer.
You might buy a drive that doesn't do PCI Express. You plug it in, it's only going at SATA speed. You might as well have just plugged it into the SATA port with the cable. It's not really getting anything by being plugged directly into that M.2 slot. Right?
Yep.
So,
and even better, so a lot of motherboards, like, they'll advertise, like, they'll even have multiple M.2 slots. Like, yeah, M.2 RAID. Usually, if there's more than one, it's because it's just SATA using the M.2 form factor.
I don't know. I've seen drives, motherboards where you can put in 2 real PCI Express.
I have,
drives
but
once.
I've also seen a lot that pointedly were not.
It's gonna be in the cheaper end, right? If you're getting a cheapo motherboard that looks like it has too many M.2s for a cheap motherboard, then probably something's up with that. You got to read the specs. Anyway, there's another thing going on that's tricky, which is you plug in an M.2 drive, and even if it's in PCI Express mode, it's linked up to some of the SATA ports. So if you also have SATA drives, plugging in something into one of the M.2 ports might disable some of the SATA ports that match up with that one.
Yep.
So it's like, oh, if I plug in something to M.2 slot 1, SATA slots 1 and 2 become disabled, and you can't plug anything into those.
Oh my God,
now.
I was about to make an analogy, but then I realized that kids today probably wouldn't even know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
But on network gear, in the older days, you'd have a bunch of ports you could plug your stuff into, like plug computer 1, computer 2, computer 3. Then you had an uplink port. That's where you plug the switch or the router or the hub into your other switch or router or cable modem or whatever, like the upstream stuff. Usually, there was one port, like you'd have ports 1, 2, and 3 were like for plugging stuff in. Then you'd have port 4 and the uplink port. If you plug something into the uplink port, it cannibalized port 4. It was one or the other, not both.
Yep. But it's like, yeah, you have 2 it's a weird situation. It's like you think, well, I got 10 plugs here, right? I can use all 10 of them. It's like, no, actually, if you use that one, it borrows bandwidth for that one, and you can't use it. You can't use both of these at once.
Yep.
One or the other.
So my motherboard supports both. So I can tell it, hey, I'm going to put a SATA drive in this M.2, and then there's one SATA port that I just can't use. It's got a different color on it.
Yep.
Or I can tell it that's an NVMe PCIe card, and it says, yes, sir, your SATA port is ready and available.
Yeah, it's, you got to make sure you're aware of this before you just start plugging stuff in, because it'll tell you like which ports become disabled and stuff like that, right?
Now, what's funny is I got to remember how old I am, because AHCI, I remember that being the new way to do things, and then I just noticed, because I'm looking at the Wikipedia here, in addition to supporting legacy AHCI.
Yep, it's NVMe now, right?
Yep, NVMe.
I forget what that stands for.
NVM Express.
Okay, that doesn't... That's
Non-volatile memory host controller interface. NVM HCIS.
Yeah.
To deal with all that shit, this is kind of why this is really interesting, is that SATA... And PATA, like old IDE with the parallel channels, like, the big ribbon cable, it only had all those channels to try to push a lot of data as fast as possible, and more wires was just better back in the old days. Nowadays, one wire is usually better. Serialized transactions can generally be scaled better anyway. But hard drives could not execute parallel instructions because there's a spinning platter.
The needle can read like one spot at a time.
Maybe they could be, as long as the data was formed the right way, they could be writing onto one side of one platter and reading onto part of another platter.
I don't know about the inside of a hard drive works.
That is not, even if that existed, that is not something you could take advantage of or be scalable. The reality was that hard drives could effectively just queue up operations but couldn't do them in parallel. And early SATA SSDs were pretty much the same way, because even though they were a solid-state drive internally, which theoretically could be engineered to have parallel read and write operations, you wanted it to be compatible with the way hard drives plugged into computers, so it just plugged into SATA. So even if the drive supported it, your computer couldn't support that. As far as I can tell, NVMe allows for the idea that you have a drive that could have parallel I/O and take advantage of that.
Right. It's like you plug in a drive to SATA, and it's like, sure, it can tell the computer that this is a solid state drive and not a magnetic drive. The computer, the operating system can account for that to a certain extent, right? Treat it slightly differently, but it's still speaking the same SATA protocol. There's only so far it can go to treat it differently, right? By plugging it into something different and being like, this is definitely not a magnetic drive. This is definitely solid state storage with these capabilities. You can take full advantage of those capabilities and not using a protocol that was designed for a hard drive with a big spinning platter that, physically spun around with a motor.
Yep. So NVMe or NVM Express, or you'll see people refer to it different ways. That's the thing if you buy like one of those Intel solid state drives that's just a PCI card. Mm-hmm. Well, PCIe card.
Yeah. So another thing you might be confused about is when you're shopping for M2 drives, you'll see all these numbers like 2280 and 22 something else and all these numbers. And it's like, what the hell are all these numbers? And like the motherboard will list like 4 different numbers and but the drive will only have one number. And of course, common sense, you just go, oh, okay, I'll just make sure the number on the drive matches one of the compatible numbers on the motherboard and you're good to go, which is true. But it's important to know what that number means. That number is literally just the size and shape of the M2 drive. 22 is the width, and the length of it is, the other number, 80.
Every now and then, a standard makes sense.
Right, so 2280 is like is the normal size for most of them that you're going to get these days. Like the Samsung 850s, which or whatever, like the Evos, those are 2280, I'm pretty sure.
Now, in the old days...
if you see one that's like 2240, well, it's a short, stubby one.
Now, in the old days with like ISA and PCI, like the old things you'd plug into computers, they didn't really have that much of a tight tolerance on how big the things, like there were rules about how big things could actually be, but like some video cards would just be longer and you just had to know and take it into account. And the tolerances weren't that big because computer cases were big. The whole point of M.2 is to be able to build very space-efficient computers. So the specifications and the way you refer to these things encoded those sizes directly like this because people care a lot about how many millimeters wide something is.
Well, you'll see on the motherboard usually there'll be the M2 connector and then one screw and then another screw if it allows for the longer ones.
Yep.
Right? And that's you're only going to put one screw in there. And the way you install it is real simple. You put in the end with the clips into the slot, you push it down and get flat against the motherboard, top, or some of them go on the bottom of the motherboard.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And then you put in the one screw and you're good to go. It's great.
I could even I could slide one into my NAS up there if I want.
No separate power connectors, no nothing. Okay, now one more thing you got to know is like this A-B business.
Luckily,
right?
This doesn't, like, you don't have to worry about it as much because it's kind of like in the old days with AGP, like whether or not you had the tab for the voltages and everything.
Yep. You don't have to worry about this too much, but it's also good to know.
Yeah.
Is that so on the connector part, there's a little notch. And some have the notch on the left.
B.
Some have the notch on the right.
The M.
Some have both notches.
The B and M.
Yep. So you'll see a drive will be like B plus M. That means that on the connector part, it's got 2 notches on it. You just got to make sure it fits in your motherboard. It's probably going to fit.
Yep. I'm pretty sure pretty much all motherboards have B and M
If you buy a modern motherboard from, Asus, ASRock, Gigabyte, whoever, right, and you buy a Samsung Evo M2, it's going to fit. It's going to be just fine.
It's sort of interesting that this is the kind of thing where it matters for early adopters because there would be things that only supported certain kinds of keying.
Yeah, it's like when M2 was brand new, everyone was still feeling it out, getting a little, but now it's standardized. You're good to go.
Like AGP, there were in the old days, you could buy video cards that were AGP and try to plug them into your AGP port, and they just wouldn't fit. And the assumption was the only people buying AGP video cards in that era were people who knew what they were doing. And then later, the AGP ports just supported every kind of AGP card.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope we demystified the deal with M.2 because, frankly...
It took me a while to figure it out.
Yeah. If you
I only figured out those numbers somewhat recently.
So if you have an existing computer, you're just going to buy a SATA hard drive or SSD or whatever and stick it in.
And they're still making new SSDs that are SATA, and they're still just great and still just fine and still crazy fast. There's nothing wrong with those.
But if you're building new computers, pretty much, if you're
it's going to cost you a bit more to get an M2 drive. So if you want to save money, that's the first place to save money is to get the SSD that goes SATA instead of M2 because for most normal people doing normal stuff, that difference you won't know. Your game is going to load a little slow or whatever.
But I predict that
the SSDs are still crazy fast. You could save like $100 to $200 by not going M2.
Oh, my HTPC probably got 4 more years of life just by replacing its old spinning disk with a regular old SSD.
That is one other good thing about SATA is that you had your spinning disks hooked up to SATA. Now you can get an SSD plugged into the same hole.
But I think it won't be long until the vast majority of computers, if you buy or build one, even if it's still SATA, you're gonna have one hard drive and it's gonna be an M.2.
Yep.
If you have two hard drives, it's just gonna be two M.2s. And then the only other kinds of hard drives.
The main limitation is that the biggest M2s are like 1 terabyte. I think I've seen some 2 terabyte ones, but they cost as much as a whole computer. Like
mine,
get a 1 terabyte M2 is like $1,000. It's like fuck no.
I have
the 512 is like is the price for people who have money, and the 256 is for the price of people who have less money.
Yep. But that's fine, because if you need more space,
just add a SSD that's much cheaper, or add a magnetic drive even.
If you need a lot of space.
Like if you just got, like, think about it, if you got a computer and it's like, okay, I'll install Windows on the M2. I'll install the applications I use the most on the M2 so they load real fast. All my games, my Adobe apps, whatever.
But all my other crap on just a cheap SSD that I plugged into a SATA port.
If you got other stuff, you could put it on an SSD. And if you even want to save more money, it's like, okay, I got a huge video collection. You could put that on a magnetic drive and you wouldn't notice for shit.
Now, the fun thing about magnetic drives, it's so cheap.
You could get massive one.
Might as well just buy 2 and rate them. Like, why not?
Get an 8 terabyte. Oh, if you got money. But yeah, you just get an 8 terabyte one.
If you don't have money,
4 terabyte.
4 terabyte spinning discs ain't expensive.
No, it's not. You can get a 4 terabyte like spinning magnetic disc for like less than $100 probably.
Way less than that.
And meanwhile, to get 4 terabytes of M2 storage is going to cost you like $5,000. Right? It's ridiculous, the difference in price. So the magnetic drive is not dead yet, right? That's why you still
the magnetic drive is the place is for if you have terabytes of data that you want to store.
I think people are not storing so much anymore because they're streaming their music, they're streaming their videos, and most, maybe you got a photo collection you keep in the cloud on Google Photos, and then, stuff like that. It's like, well, now you're not storing anything. But people who are still storing things, people who are storing photos locally, people who have videos downloaded or making videos, usually creators are going to be storing, right? Or anything like that. Yeah, you might need to throw a magnet drive in there to get your storage up. Or just a NAS, but that's still a magnet drive. It's just in a different box instead of the box your computer's in.
So if you're building a computer in the near future, you're probably going to have one hard drive for all your basic stuff.
Now you know how the M2 goes.
Yep, it'll be an M.2. And we're done.